When the sea surges against the land, irregularly, not haphazardly, this motion binds the gaze without fettering it and sets free the thoughts. The surge that sets the thoughts in motion is here being investigated scientifically in its own motion, in the large wave channel at Hanover. The motions of water are still less researched than those of light.
Ach, ihr seid ein deutschen Dampfer. Alles klar, ja, sag mal, normalerweise solltet ihr das wissen als Deutsche, dass ihr euch hier bei Elbe 1 zu melden habt. Und mich würde mal interessieren, wo Sie eigentlich hinwollen, oder?
Wir wollen raus nach Helgoland. Und von wegen Melden, ich hätte jetzt zwar mal gerufen, aber auch nicht. Ich wollte gerade hier versuchen.
Auf welchem Kanal haben Sie denn gerufen, oder?
Auf der 16 erstmal.
Das kann nicht angehen, dann hätten wir Sie gehört. Ist in Ordnung, ich habe aber soweit mitbekommen. Verkehrsinformationen für Sie habe ich hier vorliegen. Wir haben ausgehend gemeldet, gerade quer ab unserer Position, die Kehrwiederbound für Bremen.
Enlightenment. That is a word in the history of ideas. In German, Aufklärung. In the year 1858 in Wetzlar, the local government building officer Meydenbauer had the task of measuring the dimensions of the cathedral facade. To save the cost of erecting scaffolding, he traversed the length of the facade with a basket hanging from block and tackle, by the same method used for cleaning windows. One evening in the year 1858 in Wetzlar, as he wanted to climb down from the basket into a window of the tower, the basket swung away from the facade, and Meydenbauer was in danger of crashing down. In the nick of time, I grabbed the curved edge of an arch with my right hand, and with my left foot, I shoved the basket far into the air. The counteraction sufficed to push my body into the opening, and so on. As I climbed down, the thought occurred to me, is it not possible to find a substitute for measurement by hand through using the principle of reversal of the visual perspective that is captured in a photographic image? This thought, forced out by the personal difficulty and danger involved in measuring building constructions, was the father to the technique of scale measurement. The idea of obtaining measurements through photography came to Meydenbauer after he was suspended between life and death. That means it is dangerous to hold out physically on the spot, safer to take a picture. After this idea had first been aired publicly, the Prussian War Ministry offered to carry the cost of an experiment. But this came to nothing because there was a war on at the time. The first major scale measurement based on photography was achieved in 1868 at the fortress of Saint-Louis. Later, Meydenbauer initiated the establishment of memorial archives, which creates a correlation in the sense that the military destroy and the curators of monuments act to preserve. He wrote, "Perhaps some would find it incredible, but it is a fact proved by experience. In a scale picture one does not see everything, but one sees many things better than on the spot. This capacity to see better is the reverse side of mortal danger." Arduous and dangerous to hold out physically on the spot. Safer to take a picture and evaluate it later, protected from the elements, at one's desk.
Ja, da kommt jetzt diese Kaserne. Siehst du, das sind Panzer drin. Jetzt warte mal, ich schau mal nach.
Ja, die Bezugskoordinate müsste sein Uniform Papa Tango 53 15 83 04.
Ja. Schau mal durch, was das für Panzer ist. Siehst du hinten den runden, den Luftfilter, der da drin ist?
Ja.
Ja, also ich meine, das wäre der M60 oder sowas.
Ja,
ne?
korrekt.
How to face a camera. The horror of being photographed for the first time. The year 1960 in Algeria. Women are photographed for the first time. They are to be issued with identity cards. Faces which up till then had worn the veil. Only those close have looked on these faces without the veil, family and household members. When one looks into the face of an intimate, one also brings in something of the shared past. The photograph captures the moment and thus crops away past and future.
Und
Steht da auch einer?
nee, da steht keiner da. Das ist so, das ist der Wärmeschatten. Da stand bis vor kurzem einer und man sieht unterschiedlich starke Schatten zum Beispiel. Der ist schwächer, der ist ganz stark noch. Man sieht es auch an diesem vorhandenen Abgasstrahl, der von der ehemaligen Aufwärmung herrührt. Man kann also sagen, dass der hier noch länger dort gestanden ist als der zum Beispiel.
Und wie lang?
Ja, auf die Länge oder auf die Zeit kann man nicht eingehen. Man kann eben nur sagen, das war länger als das, aber in Minuten kann man es nicht ausdrücken. Und man sieht auch sehr schön den unterschiedlichen Befüllzustand der Flächen. Das heißt also, da ist zum Beispiel Sprit drin hier und da ist kein Flugzeugkraftstoff drin. Und dann da zum Beispiel, der hier stand wahrscheinlich genauso lange da wie der und die beiden sind weniger lange gestanden. Das sind also diese Aussagen, die man aus diesen Infrarotaufzeichnungen rausholen kann.
In 1960 in Algeria, a conscript soldier named Marc Garanger photographs the faces of women who have never before been photographed. They are to be issued with identity cards. Faces which up till then had worn the veil. The veil covers mouth, nose, and cheeks, and leaves the eyes free. The eyes must be accustomed to meet a strange gaze. The mouth cannot be accustomed to being looked at. A mouth, to be able to taste something, must come close to its object. The eye, to be able to see, can remain at a distance from its object. Enlightenment, Aufklärung, that is a word in the history of ideas. In German, Aufklärung also has a military meaning, reconnaissance, flight reconnaissance. In Central Europe, the sky is cloudy most of the time. Clear skies on about 30 days in the year. On the 4th of April 1944, the sky was cloudless. Preceding rain showers had precipitated the dust in the air. American aircraft had taken off in Foggia, Italy, and flown towards targets in Silesia, factories for synthetic petrol and rubber known as Buna. On the flight over the IG Farben Company factory, still under construction, a pilot clicked his camera shutter and took photographs of the Auschwitz concentration camp. First picture of Auschwitz, taken at 7,000 meters altitude. The pictures taken in April 1944 in Silesia arrived for evaluation at Medmenham, England. The analysts discovered a power station, a carbide factory, a factory under construction for Buna, and another for petrol hydrogenation. They were not under orders to look for the Auschwitz camp, and thus they did not find it. How close the one is to the other, the industry, the camp. It was not until 1977 that 2 employees of the CIA went through the archives to find and evaluate the photographs of Auschwitz. It was not until 33 years later that the following words were inscribed: Tower and Commandant's House and Registration Building and Headquarters and Administration and Fence and Execution Wall and Block 11. and the word gas chamber was inscribed. Inspired by the success of the TV series Holocaust, that aims to depict vividly suffering and dying and thus turns it into kitsch, 2 members of the CIA fed into the photo archive computer the coordinates of all strategically important targets situated in the vicinity of the concentration camps, and thus also the coordinates of the IG Farben plant at Monowitz. There must be pictures of everything. They evaluated the photographs rediscovered after 33 years, working in their free time, and they wrote, "A small vehicle was identified in a special secured annex adjacent to the main camp gas chamber. Eyewitness accounts describe how prisoners arriving in Auschwitz, not knowing they were destined for extermination, were comforted by the presence of a Red Cross ambulance. In reality, the SS used that vehicle to transport the deadly Cyclone B crystals. Could this be that notorious vehicle? The evaluators have no way of knowing for certain." In January 1945, snow lies on the ground, and the worker slaves of the Buna plant imprint their footsteps in the picture. In this January of 1945, as the Red Army approach, the roof of the barracks in which the SS carried out on human beings experiments usually reserved for animals is completely covered with snow, which means that the barracks are probably already evacuated. The snow on the roofs of the neighboring barracks is already melting, which means that they are still inhabited. The evaluators verify. That means they establish the verity of the existence of the camp down to the last detail, and they do this with relish for their role as specialists. Since photography and aircraft flight came into existence, there has also been aerial photography. This picture was taken by a dove with a camera attached to its body. This is how a carpet must look to a cat. The pattern of the carpet is woven for people standing upright, for the view from above. Human beings must learn anew to recognize the pattern of the earth from the perspective of the air. A primer for this new world picture is published with hay harvest and farmhouse, and tables and chairs in a garden restaurant, and washing on the line, and...
As an example of eye movement analysis in ergonomic research, we will show you how it is being used in our helicopter studies. The pilot wears the well-known NAC eye mark recorder. We will now take off for a short flight. Now the pilot must take action to clear a bridge.
and tank tracks in the sand, and artillery positions in the snow, and dead straight footpaths made by soldiers between flak positions, good track discipline, and natural footpaths over the snow-covered barrack square, breaking of track discipline, and prisoners in the camp, and in barracks buildings, and marine latrine, and the Allied ships at the landing at Salerno, like stars. These stars are then red.
Machst du was kaputt? Das geht, okay.
The Renault plant in Paris-Billancourt destroyed. 1 year later, rebuilt and the rebuilding photographed, and attacked again and the attack photographed, and destroyed again, and the destruction captured by a picture. Because bomber pilots cannot properly estimate whether they have hit their target and to what effect, in World War II they began to equip bomber planes with cameras. The preserving photograph, the destroying bomb, these two now pressed together. The bomber pilots had the first workplace in which a camera was employed to control effectivity. The workbench of a metal presser. The steel work tools for pressing metal. Fritz Peters, who took this photograph in 1982, wrote, I saw a factory floor which must have stopped participating in technical progress sometime around the beginning of this century. On the ceiling one can make out the shaft for transmitting the power to the machines.
Bei Holzformen kommt es immer vor, dass die sich verziehen, weil die ja jetzt jahrelang auch liegen.
The work of the metal presser. With a steel tool, he pulls a rotating piece of metal over a wooden form. In the year 1982, the proprietor of the last surviving metal press factory in West Berlin died, and there was no one who wanted to take over the business. Photographs from the workshop, which is being emptied out. The working materials are placed in the yard. To think, they will be given to the dead artisans in the burial chamber, like the gold to the pharaohs. Instead of gold, silver, just the silver that turns to black in the grain of the photograph. The skill of metal pressing traces back to the trades of belt maker and armory smith. These workmen beat and chased the metal into shape with hammer blows. The coppersmith beats the hollow form from the sheet metal with tens upon thousands of hammer blows. The technique of metal pressing is a technique of reproduction, only about 180 years old, scarcely older than photography. Automatic pressers and die stampers will now replace the metal presser. For 60 years, the metal press Grasmey & Co. produced bowls, vases, cooking pots, thimbles, lighting appliances, and other rounded and hollow semi-finished products for industrial customers. In World War II, the largest metal sheets were pressed for searchlights to show up aircraft in the sky. The aircraft, for their part, threw light bombs, like a lightning flash, to illuminate the earth for a photo. The metal press factory had tried to make a small living out of war production. War production is mass production, and mass production is the surest form of death for the small artisanal enterprise. With mass production, the goods become cheaper, and the moment they are finished, they are already halfway to the rubbish dump. The old work tools, which are now obsolete, are thrown onto the scrap heap. The military will now process images. The military authorities, here and elsewhere, constantly take pictures of the world. In fact, more than the eyes of the soldiers are capable of evaluating. A program is being developed for an optical sensor that can count the points on a die. More pictures of the world than the eyes of the soldiers are capable of evaluating. A program is being developed that focuses on sections of aerial photographs and isolates moving objects, in this case, cars. More pictures than the eyes of the soldiers can consume. A program is being developed that automatically identifies people and vehicles on infrared photographs. How to react to a camera. First thought, why all these spotlights? Is a film being shot? Alfred Cantor, who survived 3 concentration camps, including Auschwitz, drew these pictures immediately after the liberation. Some based on sketches kept by fellow prisoners, most based on his visual imprints. Here he reconstructs the arrival at Auschwitz and labels the goods trains with the words Deutsche Reichsbahn Kassel. The scenic director of the TV series Holocaust subsequently used these same words. The new arrivals have to give up their baggage. Special commandos will collect it together. Transport of Cyclone B in camouflaged lorry, camouflaged with the Red Cross. Alfred Cantor's drawings are factually accurate. The concrete palisades of the camp fence factually had this curved shape on top. and the drawings serve as a substitute for photographs, like the drawings of proceedings in courtrooms where photography is not permitted. Imprints from a place which cannot possibly be conveyed by photographic images. In actual fact, the Nazis did take photos in Auschwitz. These photographs were taken by 2 SS men in the so-called effects section. Effects, that is, the personal possessions of those, living or dead, who have just arrived in the camp after several days' journey in a goods train. Since the authorities began to take photographs, everything is accompanied by pictures, including the crimes they themselves commit. A mountain of pictures grows up beside a mountain of files. This picture was made, secretly, by unidentified prisoners in Auschwitz. They wanted to broadcast the truth about this camp. The Nazis did indeed take photographs in Auschwitz. They did not publish any of them. It seemed advisable to them to suppress every truth about the camp. When a train arrived at Auschwitz, the SS took on the task of organizing the so-called selection process. They divided the new arrivals into those who were able to work and those who were not. Those considered unable to work were the children under 15 and the men and women over 40, all sick people and all women with children. They were all sent straight to the gas chambers. A woman has arrived at Auschwitz. The camera captures her in movement. The photographer has his camera installed, and as the woman passes by, he clicks the shutter, in the same way he would cast a glance at her in the street, because she is beautiful. The woman understands how to pose her face so as to catch the eye of the photographer, and how to look with a slight sideways glance. On a boulevard, she would look in the same way, just past a man casting his eye over her, at a shop window. And with this sideways glance, she seeks to displace herself into a world of boulevards, men and shop windows, far from here. The camp run by the SS shall bring her to destruction, and the photographer who captures her beauty for posterity is from this very same SS. How the two elements interplay, preservation and destruction. The SS took these pictures. The camera was part of the camp equipment. The aerial photographs reproduce the victims at a distance of 7,000 meters. In the grain of photography, they find a protection for their personalities. Hannah Arendt wrote, "The concentration camps were laboratories." Laboratories in which experiments were carried out to see whether the fundamental claim of totalitarian systems that human beings are capable of being totally dominated is correct. Here the question was to establish what was possible at all and to obtain proof that absolutely everything is possible.
Durch die unterschiedlichen Aufnahmestandorte anders aufgenommen wird, anders abgebildet wird. Das blinkt, ne? Verändert, wenn Sie so wollen. Das ist eben auch die Hauswand, ne?
Ja,
weil die einmal
von
links und einmal von rechts, sag ich mal, oder hier vom Dach her und einmal vom Giebel her gesehen wird. Ne? Ja, also alles, was gegenüber der Objektebene ist, nicht richtig oder gegenüber der Bildebene, sagen wir mal, verschoben ist.
De quelle couleur tu fais les ongles?
Oh, je sais pas encore exactement, peut-être un peu violet.
Meine Zielsetzung ist ja immer noch die, dass man ihn tatsächlich mal die Videokamera nicht unten aufs Feld richten, sondern auf eine Person zum Beispiel, die davor irgendwie dann vorbeigeht und die dann durch einen Roboter skizzieren lassen. Porträt malen, ja.
Alfred Meidenbauer, the man who discovered the scale picture from photography, also initiated the establishment of memorial archives. He believed that the great artistic achievements of humanity lie in the past, and he proposed that building sites be photographed in order to be able to draw the front elevation in case of destruction. Lying Open is an album of the Prussian Institute for Scale Measurement Pictures, 1937. Interior view of townhouses in the Vossstraße, in the center of Berlin. The objects sit securely in their place. The photograph confirms that they are in the right place. An inventory is taken. The Institute for Scale Pictures registers the row of dwellings house by house so that from the photos the front elevation can be drawn. Meanwhile, building firms are already on the spot and have taken out the windows. At the end of the row, there is already a building site for the new Reichskanzlei, the Chancellery. The objects find reassurance from the photo that they are in their rightful place. Then they will be removed. Door frames and parquet flooring have already been erased from the inventory. Meidenbauer's fear of death had initiated an administrative authority, and it is up to an authority to work together with the neighboring authority. In 1937, the General Building Inspectorate was in the process of demolishing the city center of Berlin in order to build it anew. The demolition was carried out with care in order to preserve the building materials and took up to 60 days per house. A section head of the Building Inspectorate drew this picture of his ideal in which the artillery shot clear the building area. As the Allied bombers arrived over Berlin, the diary of the General Building Inspectorate described it as valuable preliminary work for the purposes of reconstruction. The pictures that the Allies made at the time of their aerial attacks are used today to search building areas for unexploded munitions for the purposes of reconstruction.
Der Angriff hat wahrscheinlich Daimler-Benz gegolten, oder? Ist hier in der Nähe, oder?
Ja, auf jeden Fall. Das geht auch aus den Akten hervor.
Das ist ein Fehlwurf wohl gewesen, ein bisschen zu weit ab.
Ja, das war ein Angriff auf Daimler-Benz.
In the plan for this new Berlin to be created by the industrial administration and authorities, the IG Farben Company already had its name down for participation. In Monowitz, the IG Farben Company erected a large plant for production, and the SS provided the labor force. Hard work accompanied by undernourishment and illness. Sometimes 1/7 of the labor group perished in one day. 30 out of 200 perished in one day. Works commando on the march to work in the Buna plant. Captive balloons in the background for protection against low-flying aircraft. After the war, the IG Farben Company took another name, as some SS men also did. On the arrivals platform at Auschwitz, the division was made, death or work. Inherent is the notion that along with contempt for humanity is the idolization of work. Already then, there was as little lack of labor force as there was of space. Already then, work had to be created, and this was done with war production and destruction. What is no longer possible to believe in is once again idolized. 1960 in Algeria, the colonies. 1944 in Auschwitz, the human being as labor power. (1960) in Algeria, the property of the colonies. 1944 in Auschwitz, work as the sole destiny. Enlightenment, a word in the history of ideas. In German, Aufklärung also has a meaning in military language, reconnaissance. Aufklärung also has a meaning in police language, to clear up the case. The police will now process pictures. The police, here and elsewhere, has on file photographs of millions of people, criminal suspects. How can the face of a human being be described with certainty so that it can be recognized by everyone? By everyone, also by a machine. How to describe a face. The police is not yet able to register the characteristics of a human face that remain the same in youth and old age, in happiness and in sorrow. The police does not know what it is, the picture of man.
Noch zu den Raumversuchen mitzunehmen, also dass du nicht so im Nichts da schwimmst, sondern Raum heißt, da ist ja eine Situation vor dir.
Wenn ich mache das, ich probiere manchmal zu sehen, das, diese ist so, das ist so, oder es ist besser manchmal nicht denken über das, nur wie...
Doch, erst denken und dann zeichnen und dann wieder denken. Also beim Zeichnen kannst du nicht darüber nachdenken.
Sehen, wenn das ist so, das...
Ja, das ist gut, das kannst du machen.
Gut, ja.
Also war schon irgendwo ein Maß, du willst ja ein Maß finden. Und insofern ist ein Nachdenken.
And because the police does not know what it is, how to describe the picture of a human being, the police wants at least to take measurements of it, to express its picture in numbers. Anyway, men wear beards and women paint themselves to be beautiful, which makes the task of measurement difficult. To get an exact measurement of the human picture, the hair must go. These scale pictures were made by Alfred Dürer. They came with his book Instruction in Measurement, with the circle and the T-square, in lines, planes and solid bodies. The mathematical artists of the Renaissance sought to represent the object by means of the principle of central perspective. A body on a surface is depicted according to the rules of projective geometry. This precedes depiction by photographic means. Here, Leonardo depicts the whole Earth projected onto the surface. Dürer, again, took measurements of objects. From the study of nature, he obtained numbers and rules. The calculating machines of today make pictures out of numbers and rules. Here, Piero della Francesca. Then pictures into measurements, today measurements into pictures.
In this KC-10 refueling mission, chained coordinate systems are used to represent the aircraft, its refueling boom, and the nozzle. SPX has the capacity simultaneously to process 3 dynamic objects independent of the eye point without affecting other system capacities.
In England, the Iron Age representation of a horse or dragon, which measures from head to tail over 100 meters. Only a god can achieve the ideal distance for an overview of the whole picture, or a pilot. In the First World War, a field crossed diagonally by a wide path. In reality, an aircraft hangar with vaulted roof covered with earth. The face of the earth, as they say, masked by beard, glasses and wig.
Simulated Thermal Imaging System, TIS mode, can be used not only for night vision exercises, but also for detecting and attacking targets in daytime that are camouflaged by fog or smoke.
Was ist denn das da vorne? Ja, das ist aber... Nee, das ist nix. Das ist Schaden dieser Buschgrube oder irgend sowas von der Buschgrube.
Nein.
Keine Buschgrube?
Nee. Schau dir mal das Längen-Breiten-Verhältnis an. Ich meine, dass es getarnt ist.
Ach, das ist getarnt. Dann vielleicht, dass das... Ne, aber für einen Jeep ist es wieder zu groß, ne? Na, schau mal.
Nein, ich meine, das ist ein Schützenpanzer.
Ja, Schützenpanzer?
Der M113?
Ja, M113 unterm Netz. Schau. Naja, doch, ja, wenn man genau, da sieht man, weißt du, so das Netz, ne, wenn das so drüber, dass man hinten da das Stück vom Panzer sieht.
Ja.
Schau, rechts hinten, ne, da sieht man doch die Luke, ne, diese rechteckige Luke sieht man hinten, siehst du?
Ja,
ne?
Ja.
Leider haben wir nicht mehr gefunden als den einen Panzer. Damit ist der Auftrag erledigt, ne?
Ja.
In the Second World War, the railway station Dammtor in Hamburg had buildings constructed around it, and on these buildings and on the station roof were painted paths and trees. In Bremen, a tributary of the river Weser was covered over with wood, because riverways and railways give the pilot orientation. Now the river Weser looks like an area of agricultural production, reclaimed land. Rotterdam. The petrol tanks were covered with camouflage nets in which dummy trees were planted. And Rummelsburg. The petrol tanks were bedecked so that they appeared to be tenement houses with inner courtyards. The Nazis brought out a book with guidelines for optical illusion painting. Perhaps an anti-Dürer, perhaps an actualization. In Rechlin, an aircraft hangar painted with detached houses with trees between. To the sky, the war installations should appear to be private homes. The Allied reconnaissance discovered this camouflage and illusion and published the knowledge of this in a specialist publication. The cover blown in Nordholz on a dummy airfield, which was intended to attract bombing attacks. Nearby, the real airfield. The original is much less clear than the copy. Beside the real world is set a second world, a world of pure military fiction. 3 days after the first aerial photograph of Auschwitz, 2 prisoners succeeded in escaping. They wanted to tell the world the truth about the camp. One of them, Rudolf Vrba, then 19 years old, had already been in the camp for 2 years. He had worked on the construction of the IG Farber Buna plant and then afterwards for the camp administration. There, he had to search through the possessions of those who were admitted into the camp, alive or dead. The Nazis called these possessions effects. Among these possessions of his fellow prisoners, Vrba also found things to eat, which sustained his strength and life. Again, these pictures that the SS had made to show the world one day how they had destroyed the Jews. Among the shaven heads, a girl who smiles. In Auschwitz, apart from death and work, there was a black market. There were love stories and resistance groups. Alfred Wetzler had worked in the clerical office. He committed to memory the date, country of origin, and the number of the new arrivals. In April 44, Vrba and Wetzler had to work outside the electrified boundary fence. They hid under a pile of boards. To keep tracker dogs at bay, they laid down Russian tobacco soaked with petroleum, as an experienced fellow prisoner had advised them to do. After 3 days, the SS gave up the search for the 2 men. On the way to Slovakia, they were taken in by a peasant woman. Vrba thought, if he died now, he would not have lived for nothing. He had told the truth about Auschwitz to at least one other person. If the SS had caught the 2 men in flight, they would have hanged them on these gallows and left them there for some days as a warning, or executed them against the notorious wall between Block 10 and Block 11. It was dangerous to be an eyewitness. Would these deportees have allowed themselves to be brought to the camp without resistance if the truth about Auschwitz had been made known? Vrba and Wetzler reached Slovakia and wrote a report. They described the selection process. They gave witness that when a train arrived at the camp, the SS divided the new arrivals into 2 groups. To the right, to work; to the left, to death. What they gave witness to was inscribed on the aerial photographs and can be read there. A train stands at the platform of the camp section Birkenau. A group of deportees, too young, too old, too weak for work, are being led in the direction of the gas chambers. Crematorium Complex 2. The gate stands already open. Right next to the gate is a flower bed. Yard and building should give the impression that here was a hospital or a sanatorium. Above the flower bed, a flat building, recognizable almost only in the shadow of the front wall. Undressing room. Those arriving were told to undress in this room in preparation for showering. At a right angle, the gas chamber. It was equipped like a shower room. It could fit up to 2,000 human beings, who were often pushed inside by force. Then the SS fastened the doors shut. Four vents can be discerned in the roof. After a short waiting period to allow the temperature to rise, the SS, wearing gas masks, threw the poison substance Cyclone B into the vents. Everyone in the chamber died within 3 minutes. Others, who did not have to go to their deaths immediately, stand here in line for registration. Here in August 44, we see them waiting to be tattooed, to have their hair shorn, and to be allocated work. This work would also destroy most of them. The Nazis did not notice that someone had photographed their crimes. and the Americans did not notice that they had photographed them. The victims also noticed nothing. Notes as written into a book of God. The American aircraft photographed Auschwitz, but they did not attack it. Not the rail spurs leading to the camp, not the commandant's house, not the electrified boundary fence, not the execution wall between blocks 10 and 11. They did not bombard the gas chambers. The report by Vrba and Wetzler, the first eyewitness account, found its arduous way out of Slovakia into Switzerland and thence to London and Washington. Jewish functionaries appealed to London and Washington to bombard the railway spurs that led to the camp. Benjamin Axon of the Jewish Refugees Committee wrote, "The bombardment of the gas chambers would show the most clearly perceptible and the only clearly perceptible sign of the indignation that the existence of these places of execution had aroused. The military authorities and the politicians of England and the USA refused to bombard the transport routes or the death apparatus. They said they were not able to split their forces and that the way to help the Jews was to win the war as quickly as possible. Once, on September 13th, 1944, an American airplane dropped bombs on the camp by accident and photographed the accidental bombing. In 1983, as the number of atomic weapons in the Federal Republic of Germany was to be increased again, Günther Anders recalled the failure to bomb Auschwitz and demanded, "The reality must begin. The reality must begin. That means the blockading of all entrances to the murder installations which permanently persist must be equally persistent. Let us destroy the possibility of access to these weapons, to the atomic rockets." Numbers once again. These numbers are coded messages from Auschwitz prisoners who belong to a resistance group. They set the date for an uprising. On October 7, 1944, men of the Special Commandos attacked the SS guards with hammers, axes, and stones. With explosive devices made from powder that women had smuggled out from the Union munitions factory, they set fire to the crematorium. They succeeded in doing what the gigantic Allied war machine could not. They rendered one murder installation unusable. None of the resistance fighters survived. One can confirm the partial destruction of Crematorium 4 on the aerial photograph. Despair and a heroic courage made out of these numbers a picture.